It's time for America Outdoors Radio, the show that covers the outdoor scene across the U.S. of A. and the entire continent. Fishing, hunting, conservation, outdoor recreation, and great destinations. We cover it all every week. It's your country, your outdoors. Let's explore it together with your host, John Kruse.
Welcome to your Veterans Day weekend. I am glad you are here. We've got some great guests lined up for you today on the show. One of them you'll hear from in just a few minutes is Alice Jones Webb. She wrote a really interesting article that you can find at outdoorlife.com about the science of rattling up bucks. Yes, there is an art and science to this technique, which works really well for deer, especially in the rut. And in many parts of the country, especially whitetail country, that is going on right now. Our second guest of the day, our old friend Brooks Hansen. We're going to talk about preparing elk in a very delicious way. He's got a great recipe to share for you using elk backstrap. And with Thanksgiving on its way, we're going to talk about deep frying turkeys. And by the way, they've got a special on turkey fryers and accessories that you can take advantage of right now at campchef.com, as well as the way he's going to be preparing his turkey this year. I think you're going to want to hear this recipe as well. After we talk to Brooks and no doubt leave hungry, we'll talk to longtime outdoors writer Noel Vick. He also wrote a really good article recently. This one is about catching crappie in the cooling waters of November and December. He's got some great techniques for you that are going to work, especially in those southern reservoirs that you find in Missouri and Arkansas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Noel's going to tell you where to find crappie in these reservoirs and how to catch them once you do find them. In addition to that, Noel has written a great children's book that would make a wonderful gift for the holidays. It's called All Fish Are Awesome. It's an illustrated book about all sorts of fish that you'll find in freshwater and saltwater around the United States. I'm looking forward to that conversation. And our final conversation of the day, with Veterans Day in mind, is with Mike Powell. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Warriors in Quiet Waters. This is a nonprofit organization based out of Bozeman, Montana, that serves post-9/11 combat veterans. And they do so using nature as therapy. Veterans come up for a 5-day stay and immerse themselves in either fly fishing or archery bow hunting or wildlife and nature photography. Mike will tell you more about how this organization operates, the 300 veterans they serve a year, and how you can help, either as a volunteer or by donating to the cause. Put it all together, we've got a great show coming your way, which, by the way, is brought to you this week by Henry Repeating Arms. It's not too early to think about a gift and a personalized tribute edition. Check out the tribute editions at henryusa.com. That's henryusa.com. You'll not only find these beautiful lever-action rifles, but you'll also find authorized dealers near you. And while you're at henryusa.com, don't forget to ask for your free catalog and decals. Next up on America Outdoors Radio, deer season is in full swing. The rut is on. It's arguably the best time to bag yourself a mule deer or a whitetail. And that's why we've got Alice Jones Webb on the line. She wrote a great article for Outdoor Life that you can find at outdoorlife.com about how to rattle in a buck, a science-based guide to rattling tactics. Alice, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Alice, you are a deer hunter yourself, and I understand you got into rattling after a really special experience as a young lady.
I did. I was sitting on a deer stand, pretty rickety one, nothing super fancy, up a swamp oak about 18 feet, and just waiting for first light to come, and I heard what I thought was a monster coming through the woods with a plastic soda bottle, like crackling it. That's what it sounded like. I kind of made the reference to it being like Sasquatch in flip-flops because it really just was making this huge commotion. And of course, my teenage brain, being alone in the woods, conjured all kinds of craziness. But just as light was coming up, I realized it was two bucks fighting. I could see them pushing each other around. And it was an experience that really just left an impression on me because it was so loud and just so chaotic. And so, of course, I wanted to know if I could replicate it. And at the same time, I had not had a lot of experience back then, and I kind of abandoned it, put my rattling horns in storage and kind of forgot about it. And then as the rut was coming up this year, I thought, maybe there's something to this, but I didn't want to go out and just kind of follow my way through the woods and see what happened. So I decided to see if there was any research on it. And of course there is, because white-tailed deer are some of the most researched game animals on the planet. And so I kind of found this study that was done. It was a 3-year-long study conducted by Dr. Mickey Hellickson with a bunch of other researchers from that famous deer lab at the University of Georgia. And they kind of studied what the best way to rattle in deer.
You know, I'm glad that somebody did this, because being a rank amateur myself, I don't have a clue. I would just go out there with a couple of plastic antlers and just rattle away and not have any idea whether it should be loud, whether it should be quiet, how long to do it, or anything like that. But they really broke it down, and they got some really good information about what the deer actually respond to. Why don't you share some of those results in terms of the length of time that they are rattling during the pre-rut, post-rut, and peak rut?
Sure. So they went out in 2-man teams. They did 4 different ways. They did short and quiet, short and loud, long and loud, and loud. They were kind of wanted to see one brought in the most response and measured like which types of bucks were responding. Were they young bucks? Were they middle-aged bucks? Were they mature bucks? And it was really actually kind of surprising. So they rattled with the loud sequences they did was like no holds barred. It was clanging the antlers together as loud as they could, and they also made lots of other noise, like rustling the leaves and banging on the tree and breaking sticks, and basically just making a commotion. The quieter ones were just rattling, and they kind of kept their elbows in close to make sure they didn't clang them together too loudly. And the long sessions were 2 minutes, and the short sessions were 1 minute, and then they would repeat the sequence again after 10 minutes. So what they found was that by far, the louder sequences drummed up more buck response than the quieter ones. That's pretty interesting.
Was it the louder sequences for a short time or a longer period of time?
It didn't matter how long the rattling sequences were. They saw no difference between the short ones and the long ones, just between the quiet ones and the loud ones. The loud ones, regardless of how long the rattling sequence was, drummed up the most attention.
I also saw in the article, it was very interesting, that if they didn't come on the first series of rattles, that they might come on the second or even the third, but it was a decreasing probability.
Yes, that's also very interesting. So one of the ways they know, like if a deer responded, was they actually did some of these close to radio collared bucks. So they knew exactly whether the bucks were getting up and maybe moving a little closer, so they didn't have to necessarily see the bucks come all the way in, but they could see that maybe a buck was moving closer, and then he would move closer again on the second series, and then maybe come in on the third series. So they had lesser response in each subsequent series, but sometimes the bucks were moving closer each time they rattled.
You're listening to America Outdoors Radio. We are talking to Alice Jones Webb about the science of rattling up bucks, in particular white-tailed deer. So something else that was very interesting in the article is where you should be rattling from. Now, the crews that did this study, some of them were in ground blinds, others were in tree stands, and that made a real difference as to whether you saw the buck or not.
Yeah, so the researchers who were on the ground missed almost 65% of the bucks that were coming in. They couldn't see them from ground level, whereas the ones who were elevated saw much more. So basically what that's saying is if you're rattling from a tree stand, you've got a better chance of seeing the bucks respond than if you're rattling from the ground.
And wind direction, as always, plays a role in this too, doesn't it?
It does. So one of the interesting things they saw was that oftentimes the bucks would circle around to get downwind of the rattling sound. And then before they approached the rattling, they would actually circle back. So you had to be able to, they're trying to get a smell of what's going on. And I think they're probably, they have the bucks in their area. Maybe they're trying to see if it's like Tom and Harry duking it out again, or if it's some strange buck in the area.
Very interesting. One last thing we should cover here is the time of day, because there's a certain time of day that was much more successful when it came to rattling in bucks.
That is correct. So by far, morning saw more buck response than middle of the day or evening, like by vastly more. And they also found that if it was a cooler day, a calm day with little wind, and if there was a little bit of cloud cover, like 75% or more, that the bucks were more likely to respond.
Well, there you go, folks. There really is a science to rattling up a buck. And if you want to find out more, go to outdoorlife.com and check out this article by Alice Jones Webb. It's a great read, and she just gave us some great information from that article. Alice, thanks so much, and good luck in the deer stand this season.
Thank you. You too.
Sportsman's Warehouse is America's premier outfitter with the gear you need for fishing, hunting, camping, paddling, cooking, and just about anything else you can do in the woods or in the water. With over 125 stores across America, there is bound to be a Sportsman's Warehouse near you, with not only the gear you need, but also the experts to help you get the most out of the product you purchase. Head down to your local Sportsman's Warehouse today or shop online anytime at sportsmans.com. That's sportsmans.com.
When you think of Work Sharp knife and tool sharpeners, you probably think of sharpeners for the shop or the field, but Work Sharp has a whole lineup of sharpeners for the kitchen, too. We're talking about everything from easy-to-use manual and electric knife sharpeners to ceramic honing rods, whetstones, and the new rolling knife sharpener, and innovative manual sharpeners that will do wonders for your cutlery. Make sure there's never a dull moment in your kitchen. Check out the entire product line and order today at WorkSharpTools.com. That's WorkSharpTools.com.
Campers, barbecuers, tailgaters, overlanders and foodies, rookies and professionals, adventure seekers and cul-de-sac kings. No matter the lifestyle, we can all agree on one thing. Great food and great people are worth remembering. From backcountry to back patio, we are the way to cook outdoors.
Are you looking to reel in the marketing opportunity of a lifetime? America Outdoors Radio has sponsorships available, and we offer affordable platforms to reach thousands of listeners. Find out more by contacting John Kruse through his website at americaoutdoorsradio.com.
You're back in with Northwestern Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse, and I am hungry. That's why I called up Brooks Hansen with Camp Chef, because he always has recipes that make me even hungrier. Brooks, welcome back to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on. And I will do my best at trying to solve your hunger issues.
I feel like a third world child who is starving to death, but it's going to get worse in just a minute here. Let's talk about elk. That's something that you and I haven't talked about for a long time. There's a lot of elk hunters that are in the field the last couple of weeks and are going to be in the field the next couple of weeks, and some of them are going to be successful. What is a good recipe for elk that you'd recommend for these hunters?
And there is so much that you can do with elk, and elk is such a good, lean source of protein. And I hate, totally masking the flavors just because it's so good. But I've got a good idea and a good thing that I've done that's been one of our family's favorites for elk that is fairly simple, and we call it elk parmesan.
Ooh.
So think of like a chicken parm. We're going to do it with elk. So similar to, you're going to take probably a backstrap cut, or you could do like a sirloin tip roast.
Right.
And you're going to cut it into medallions. You're going to want those medallions probably about 3 inches in diameter, and you're going to pound them so they're all the same thickness. You want to keep them all the same thickness. And then season them. I like to season it with Camp Chef all-purpose seasoning, or you could go with just a salt and pepper.
Okay.
And then you're going to go into some flour as a base, and then you're going to go into a little bit of egg wash, and then into some breadcrumbs. So a panko breadcrumb, I like to use like an Italian breadcrumb with some Italian seasoning in it. And then you're going into a frying pan that's got some light oil, and you want that oil at about 350 degrees. You don't want it too hot because you don't want to burn the breading. You want to brown it but not burn it. You don't want it to be too hot. And you don't need a lot of oil. You just need to cover one side. So the least oil, the better. So you're going to fry the bottom in that oil, then flip it over. And you're going to go about a minute and a half on each side, depending on the thickness when you pound them. You don't want them super thick, and you're going to go about a minute to a minute and a half on each side. So 3, maybe 4 minutes max, and that's going to give you a medium rare on the interior of that medallion. Pull the medallion off, and you're going to put them all on a tray and drain them. So you put them on like a warming rack, drain them, and then you're going to put some mozzarella on top, some slices of mozzarella, and some parm, and you're going to throw it in the oven for about a minute and a half just to melt that cheese. Meanwhile, you're gonna make a red sauce, any type of red sauce that you like, spaghetti sauce, or I like a garlic mushroom sauce. I can do a homemade one, or you can even buy one out of a bottle or a can. And then the noodles side, I really like to use a bucatini noodle. It looks like a spaghetti noodle, but it's thicker and it's hollow like a straw. Oh. It cooks really well. It's a little thicker. It's a little more filling. And so you're going to lay down a bed of noodles, and you're going to put some sauce in there, and then lay your venison or your elk parm over the top of that and put a little more sauce, and then just finish it with chopped parsley. You're going to have, like, not the dry parsley flakes, get fresh parsley, just chop it, rough chop it really soft, and just sprinkle some of that parsley over the top. And you've got, instead of chicken parmesan, you've got elk parmesan. It's one of our household favorites. It's really good.
Oh, it sounds fabulous. I'm going to go down to the local Italian restaurant and demand that they put this on the menu. It sounds marvelous. Mission accomplished. You have made me even hungrier than I was before this phone conversation started. Let's turn our attention to that big holiday coming up. That would be Thanksgiving. It just so happens that Camp Chef has got a pre-Thanksgiving sale going on. If you go to campchef.com and check out that tab, you are going to find that you can get 30% off a turkey fryer and 10% off turkey fryer accessories. And, I've never deep fried a turkey before. I've been very cautious about it. I've heard horror stories about people catching their garages on fire. What are some tips you'd give for folks who want to go this route?
Well, first of all, don't do it in your garage.
Yes.
That's one way to catch your garage on fire. So you need to be out in an open air space and make sure that there's nothing flammable around you when you're using a turkey fryer. And then don't leave it unattended. I know we can walk away, but make sure it's always within somewhat of eyesight so you can keep tabs on it, because it doesn't take super long. It's going to require that just in case a windstorm comes or something happens to bump into it or blow it over, and then that's when you're going to get that grease fire. So you need to manage it. So those would be my tips. Make sure you're in an open area where you can't catch anything on fire, and make sure that you are monitoring and managing what's going on.
Is the biggest issue that most people have safety-wise with turkeys is that they overfill the fryer with oil?
Yeah, overfill the fryer, and then when you go in, it's too hot. And when that turkey goes right into the initial fry, the initial shock is going to start frying, and then it's going to bubble over, and that's going to be flammable. And below you, you have flame heating your pot, which is going to catch, and that's where a lot of issues arise. And follow the directions. There's directions and safety tips. Use X amount for this size of turkey, then use that amount of oil for that size of turkey.
Which means you should probably put your wife or significant partner in charge, because if you're like a typical guy, you probably just don't read directions. Having said that, though, I've always wanted to enjoy a deep-fried turkey. I've heard they're delicious.
Yes, they are. They're really good. There's a component where they're very moist. By frying that skin, it keeps a lot of the moisture internal. So, yeah, they're really moist. It's a great way to enjoy a turkey. Probably not my favorite, but it is a really good way to enjoy a turkey.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. If you want to try a deep-fried turkey, you've got some safety tips, and you've got a great opportunity to save some money by buying a turkey fryer from Camp Chef and the accessories you'll need to go with it. Just go to campchef.com for that. That's all you have to do. Now, we've got time for, maybe one more thing when it comes to Thanksgiving, and that would be, what are you going to serve at your table, and how are you going to cook it up?
So I'm going to do a turkey, a standard turkey. I think we bought a 20-pounder, or that's the goal this year. We're going to serve about 17 people on my side of the family this year.
Wow.
So I will thaw the turkey, and then I will warm up some butter and rub butter all over the skin and under the skin. And then I season it pretty heavy with Camp Chef Vegevore seasoning. We used to call it the citrus herb. It's now called Vegevore.
Okay.
Season it with that, and then I'll put it on the pellet grill, and I'm going to bake it at a high temp. So I'm smoking it, but at a high temperature. So I'm going to do it on the pellet grill at about 350 degrees. And for that 20-pound turkey, it's going to take about 2.5 to 3 hours. Once that hits 160 degrees internal temp, I'm going to pull it off, and I'm going to stick it in a cooler.
Oh.
I'm going to make sure there's some insulation around the cooler, maybe some towels. I'll put a little foil over it so I'm not just soaking the towels in turkey juice. I'm losing that juice. I'll probably put some foil over the top in the cooler, and then I'll rest it in that cooler for about 2 to 3 hours, and it'll just sit there and hold temp. It'll continue rising about another 5 degrees to get me at the 165. And it'll hold in that cooler for 3 to 4 hours. Once I'm done with that, pull it out, carve it, and serve it.
Ingenious. I'd never heard of that method before. But folks, now we're all a little wiser. for Thanksgiving ahead, whether you want to cook that turkey like Brooks just described, or maybe deep fry a turkey, or cook something else entirely, like maybe elk parmesan. There's some good food coming your way this November, and you can get a start on cooking it right by going to campchef.com. That's campchef.com. Brooks, thanks as always, sir.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on.
This portion of the show is brought to you by our friends at WorkSharp. And if you are hunting this fall, you know the importance of a sharp knife. You're going to need it for gutting that animal, butchering that animal, taking the hide off that animal, and there's a good chance you're going to have to sharpen it more than once while you're doing these things in the field. That's why a pocket knife sharpener or the guided field sharpener from WorkSharp are great items to have with you. Whether you're after deer, elk, pronghorn, or bear, a sharp knife helps you get things done after you drop that animal. Look for WorkSharp products at sporting goods stores, hardware stores, and ranch and home stores near you, or online at worksharptools.com. That's worksharptools.com.
In today's news, I'm cooking a brisket. Let's go to Jill at my house to see how it's going.
This is your house and you brought me and the crew to check on your brisket?
That's correct, Jill. How's it looking?
This is a Camp Chef Woodwind Wi-Fi. You know you can check your cook right from your phone, right?
I didn't know that was an option, Jill. Well, never mind. But before you leave, can you feed the dog?
What? No.
When we get back, why is my check engine light on? The answer may shock me.
Ready to step up to a quality-built rifle or shotgun that's a true classic? Check out Henry Repeating Arms, American-made. There's over 200 models to choose from in a variety of finishes and calibers for hunters and target shooters. Many of these are lever-action models with a look right out of the Old West. Don't be deceived, though. Henry Repeating Arms are modern, rugged, accurate, reliable, and have a lifetime guarantee. Find out more and order a free catalog today at henryusa.com. That's henryusa.com.
You're back in with America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. We got Noel Vick on the line. He is a crappie angler and a book author and so much more. And he just wrote a really good article about catching cold water crappies that appeared in the Outdoor Wire last week. Noel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So you live in Texas now, but you used to live in Minnesota, and then you spent some time in between in the south central part of the United States, kind of refining your crappie fishing this time of year.
Yes, definitely. You know, interestingly enough, I published a book back in 1999, which I think there's some copies floating around out there somewhere used. It was called Fishing on Ice. So being a 40-year resident of Minnesota, that was where my expertise was and, you know, kind of where I honed my craft in writing and such. And now I've managed to traverse the map and find myself living in Corpus Christi, Texas. But as you referenced, along the way, I spent 5 years in Arkansas and got to fish a number of the reservoirs there. And really, moving locations, it's just a matter of taking your skill set, you know, and then honing it for the environment in front of you. And that's where I ended up spending a lot of time dissecting reservoir crappies and got pretty efficient at it as well.
I was out about a week and a half ago fishing on a bass lake that's also a good crappie reservoir. Noticed the water temperatures were between 50 and 55 degrees, and the crappie bite was definitely starting to fall off. But in the south right now, I mean, you're looking at this target of 55 to 75 degree waters, and according to you, this is prime temperature for catching crappie.
Yeah, it really is. What happens, and it happens in the northern states too, you know, in Minnesota, but they just congregate in different areas. The crappies, as that temperature drops, really start to aggregate, and they also tend to start feeding on smaller things. And what I saw happen a lot in the southern reservoirs is that the fish were there, but the locals weren't catching as many because they were relying on their normal summer tactics, you know, bigger baits, bigger jigs. And it was just kind of taking, I'll call them ice fishing sensibilities, just because we have learned up there that the fish are still biting they're not feeding as much, they're feeding as smaller, so we just have to change. And you can really apply an ice fishing mindset to the southern reservoirs. The key, of course, always being finding fish if they're not there. If you find crappies, and I talk a lot in the article about brush piles and creek channels, if you find them, there are ways to trigger them. I rarely ever run into crappies that won't try something.
So let's talk about fishing reservoirs, especially a reservoir that you're not familiar with. You've heard that it's a good crappie lake, but you've never fished it before. Are you starting off looking for those creek arms? Is that the first place you're going to, and then looking for brush piles there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Before even looking at a topographical water map, I'll just look at a land map. Because, all reservoirs have the same basic characteristics, that it was dammed off. It used to be a valley and terrain. There were natural creeks running into it. And it very well may have been a small river originally. So if you can imagine that, what that kind of spider shape looks like, and then just fill it with water. So all of those dips and curvatures and creek channels still exist. They're just underwater. And the native timber and objects that were in the area before they flooded it are still there, and some decomposing. And what I reference in the article is that as people tend to build a new brush and put fish cribs and stuff down, they're generally dropped in those same reference areas. But, circling back to your original question, absolutely start with the creek arms. And I tend to start with the bigger ones in the winter, and just start running my electronics and looking for brush piles if I haven't marked them already. And then I'd see one and I'll mark it, even if it doesn't have fish on it, if I like it, and then just keep searching for ones, that have some marks on them, and come back and hit them.
All right, so let's talk about actually catching crappie this time of year. I understand you're starting to downsize a little bit.
Absolutely. What is really revolutionizing downsizing right now is tungsten.
Oh, yes.
Because you're able to fish, let's say you're using an 1/8 ounce jig, which would be pretty heavy in general in the summertime. If you're fishing deep, 1/16 is pretty normal.
Right.
What tungsten allows you to do is drop down in size by roughly 30% and get the same weight and actually a faster drop, and give them the smaller nugget to look at, but able to reach deep crappies, which as you get later in winter, they tend to range deeper. So the real trick is how do I get a small bait down to these fish that are deep? And tungsten really has changed that a lot for me.
I know a lot of folks are really fond of soft baits. Bobby Garland DS Fry is a hot one where I live. But you like to try some other types of jigs, don't you?
Yeah, I typically start with hair jigs. I just like the natural flow of them. They have a really nice drop. They tend to have better action when they're down. And I do use a lot of soft plastics as well. I also love the Bobby Garlands. And I spent my 5 years in Arkansas. I used a lot of plastics, no question about it, because it allowed me a lot more flexibility in color changes that hair jigs, marabou type, don't give you. But I still generally start with hair because that native natural flow of the hair in the water, it emulates bait fish really better than a kind of a stiffer plastic does that doesn't have a lot of motion.
Now, are you fishing these under slip bobbers, or are you fishing these just straight line to the jig?
I will do both. In fact, I'll always be pre-rigged with straight jigs, and then I'll also have slip bobbers ready. And it kind of depends on where the fish are lined up in the brush pile, if they're cruising the top, if they're on the edges, and also if I need to cover water first to find them. I'll generally start by throwing jigs. In fact, exclusively, I'll start throwing jigs into marked fish, drop it down into them. If I find they're really concentrated, that's a perfect time to then go to a slip bobber, because that allows you to get that exact depth. So if you're in 40 feet of water and they're 20 feet down, you can set your slip bobber at 20 and you can get directly back on top of them all the time. So it's really a blend. Cover water with casting jigs, and then when it's time to center and focus, and maybe you're even going to anchor or spot lock or something, then you can go to a slip bobber.
All right, let's switch topics from crappie to a new children's book that you've got out that would be a perfect Christmas gift. It's called All Fish Are Awesome. I was kind of leafing through some of the pages online. I really like this.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's an idea I've had in my head for a long time. I think we all have those kind of pipe dream projects and such, and I always wanted to write a children's book. And really the baseline of the book is, well, I could tell you first we were going to call it All Fish Are Equal, because that's really the mindset that I went into this with, because we as anglers in particular, judge fish in their worthiness based on, are they pretty? Are they good fighters? Are they ugly? Do we think they're robbing the nests of other fish and stuff? So I really just wanted to compare and contrast because, all species of fish have an importance in the ecosystem. And I wanted to get kids looking at that angle of it. And then with some fantastic illustrations. The book is half freshwater species and half saltwater species. And, I think readers, the ones we've had already that have purchased it, and I've had some photos sent to me by parents and stuff, the kids really love it. Even if a child is not of reading age, it's super entertaining because of the illustrations.
Oh, I agree. Completely agree. Who did the illustrations? They're really well done, and they're perfect for kids.
His last name is Limon. He came via the publisher, so I really don't even know him. Worked with him on the project, so my publisher paired me up. I sent them a lot of examples and samples of what I wanted. I wanted anatomical accuracy, but combined with some personality. So, you'll notice when you look through the book, you can clearly see that this is a bluegill and this is a pumpkin seed, but then they also reflect a little of the personality that you would imagine that fish would have. A shark looks angry, and a sunfish you would seem would look happy, and I think kids enjoy that. So it really just came through a process of editing and refining, and I think we really nailed it, which is good because I'm working on a couple follow-ups to it already.
The book again, folks, All Fish Are Awesome by Noel Vick. You can find it at Amazon.com. You can find it at Target. You can find it at lots of other places where you buy books, too. If you're looking for a gift for Christmas, or if you just want to spend some quality time introducing your kids or your grandkids to fish, All Fish Are Awesome is a perfect book for it. Look for it and buy it today. Noel, thanks so much for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thanks for asking me on.
Sportsman's Cove Lodge is Alaska's best lodge, and as you know, I'm a big fan. I've been to Prince of Wales Island in southeast Alaska several times. I love the float plane ride in. I love the fishing for halibut, salmon, and cod, and I can't get enough of the fantastic food and dynamite hospitality that they offer at the lodge. Now they are building new accommodations, new rooms that'll have television. They've brought Wi-Fi to the lodge too, and they're even offering extended 7-day stays with not just fishing, but other adventures too, as well as the opportunity to have a corporate retreat. Find out more about Sportsman's Cove Lodge and book your stay today at alaskasbestlodge.com. That's alaskasbestlodge.com, and use the promo code RADIO10. That's Radio 10. Let me repeat that one more time. That's alaskasbestlodge.com and the promo code RADIO10 for 10% off your next adventure.
Come explore the Dalles in Oregon for outdoors fun. Hike amongst the wildflowers, bike our riverfront trail, or visit the Gorge Discovery Center where you can enjoy a live raptor display, or even check out our National Neon Sign Museum. But don't forget the fishing. We've got salmon, steelhead, bass, walleye, and monster-sized sturgeon waiting just for you. When the day is done, tell those tall tales at one of our wineries, breweries, or restaurants and plan your next adventure. Find out more at explorethedalles.com.
Are you looking to reel in the marketing opportunity of a lifetime? Then set the hook, because we've got it right here for you. America Outdoors Radio has sponsorships available, and we offer affordable platforms to reach thousands of listeners interested in fishing, hunting, and the outdoors. Find out more by contacting John Kruse through his website at AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. That's AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. Hurry, though. If you wait too long, the big opportunity might just get away. AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com.
You know, a lot of times you have to choose between something high quality or something that saves you money. But if you could get both, why not? Especially when it comes to healthcare, and that is MediShare. You get both. Many families save $500 a month with MediShare, and that's huge. But it's also true that people wind up way more satisfied, too. The member satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. That's because MediShare works. It has for more than 30 years. It's a community of Christians who have shared more than $5 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth. They love the huge PPO network. So, yeah, really, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price in 2 minutes. Here's the number. Just call 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40. 855-SHARE-40.
Welcome back to America Outdoors Radio. It is Veterans Day weekend. We always try to make it a point to get on an organization that helps our veterans or our combat veterans. And one organization that does that very well is Warriors in Quiet Waters. They're based close to Bozeman, Montana, and they serve some 300 combat veterans a year with a healthy dose of outdoors therapy. With us here to tell you more about it is Mike Powell. He is the Chief Operating Officer for the organization. He's also retired Lieutenant Colonel from the United States Marine Corps. Colonel, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome, John.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of Warriors in Quiet Waters and why this is so important for our post 9/11 combat veterans?
Absolutely. The history is in 2007, Colonel Eric Hastings, he's a retired Marine Colonel, Vietnam fighter pilot, and combat vet. Between him and his wife, they decided on a fishing trip up in Canada that they needed to start this program. Initially, it was all supported with volunteers, with volunteer guides, donated equipment, and through the years, and we're on our 17th year now, we've started with 2 programs back in 2007 to 25 this year, supporting post 9/11 combat veterans, their spouses, and caregivers. We've transitioned from 2007 when it was just a fly fishing trip to Montana. Colonel Hastings would bring combat wounded veterans from Balboa Naval Hospital in San Diego up to Montana that year. To now, we still have as a base our fly fishing experience that acts as a catalyst into the Built for More program. It's the initial part of that program. And through a 6 to 12-month period, those warriors that we call them participate in guided discussions.
All right. You've definitely expanded. Before we talk about the new tracks that you have for veterans to participate in, let's talk about why going fly fishing in Montana and a stay at the ranch, or going hunting, or learning, nature and wildlife photography. How is this therapeutic to our combat vets?
Absolutely. Part of it's learning a new skill, whether it be fly fishing, hunting, or photography. But it also provides a safe haven, that initial experience for their mind and spirit for life. They have a chance to reflect, to be out in nature, to use really nature as therapy, as most outdoorsmen know, that can be a very moving experience, a very therapeutic experience. And along that line, it grows trust between us and the warriors, the team here at Warriors in Quiet Waters and the warriors, and sparks a lifelong, healthy friendship between the two of us, and also for the warriors when they go back to their community.
Let's talk about how this works. You sign up for one of these experiences, and when you get to the ranch, I assume you're going to be paired with some other combat veterans, and you're going to take part in these events together?
That's correct. So you're paired up with usually 6 other combat veterans through the course of the whole program, not just that initial experience of fly fishing or hunting or photography. You're also paired up with volunteers. You usually have, we call them companions, that are there to support and assist and just be a friendly face during the whole week-long experience. And then we're also paired up with guides, whether that's hunting guides, fishing guides, or in the fact of the photography experience, a professional photographer.
And I understand there is no cost for combat veterans who are accepted into the program to attend, and that includes airfare to Bozeman, Montana.
That's correct. Everything is cost-free for them, including airfare, all their equipment, thousands of dollars of top-of-the-line equipment, thanks to our supporters out there and our sponsors. And they come here without having to worry about paying for any of the items that they'll need while they're here in Montana, or when they take that gear back home and fish or hunt.
You're listening to America Outdoors Radio. We're talking to Lieutenant Colonel Mike Powell about Warriors in Quiet Waters, and you really need to check out the website, warriorsinquietwaters.org. They are offering therapy through the outdoors to our post-9/11 combat veterans. Let's talk about the 3 tracks you have. We'll start off with the original one, the fly fishing experience. So somebody is accepted into this program. What happens then?
So they're accepted into the program months in advance. They're provided a date when their week starts. They all fly in on a Monday afternoon usually. They get their gear, and on Tuesday morning, we have a ranch out north of town here that has several fishing ponds. They're set up with their guide for the week and then also their companion, and they learn the basics of fly fishing that first day. We call it Fly Fishing 101. From there, the next 2 days they're out on the trout streams of Montana, whether it be the Madison, the Yellowstone, the Missouri, some walkway adventures as well. And that Thursday night, the night before they leave, we have it's called a Sayonara dinner. It's basically a time to reflect on their week. And then let me back up that during those times between the fishing or after fishing for the day, they're also part of facilitated discussions on our pillars of a thriving life.
Let's talk a little bit about the hunting track. What does that involve?
Sure. The hunting track for this year, they come in March. They get their gear. They get set up with straight six archery here in town. And they're able to practice, learn how to use their gear, get briefs on how to hunt. Some of these veterans, have never hunted big game before. And then they come back. Their hunts are usually in September. Obviously, it's archery hunting time. And for those individuals that may or may not receive an elk tag, they're also given the chance to go out and hunt antelope as well as deer.
Okay, and the last track, the new one, the photography track, I got to tell you, as an outdoors writer, if hunting and fishing season isn't open, I get a lot of joy out of just going to a wildlife refuge or a wildlife area and doing some photography, whether it be landscape photography or wildlife photography, and I'm sure that the veterans do too.
Yeah, definitely. And it's part of a bigger picture that we see here. Mike McLeod, our professional photographer that works with us and has for years and years, heads out to teach. They're provided the photography gear to teach them how to learn to use that gear. And they go to places like Yellowstone National Park to test out and learn how to use the gear in a nature setting. They also will go through starting next year, the whole Built for More program and have the facilitated discussions. But the best part is we bring them back second and third time to be a photographer on our programs. So we pay for them to come back, and they're linked up with Mike McLeod again, and they go out and actually use their skills they've learned over the last 6 to 12 months to take photographs, professional photographs of our experiences.
I absolutely love this. One other thing we should talk about here, obviously we've got some combat veterans that are tuning in, and they can sign up for 2026 starting in January of 2025 at warriorsinquietwaters.org. But if folks are touched by what you do, they can donate right now, and they can sign up to become a volunteer right now too, can't they?
Absolutely. And there's a donate button on our web page for volunteers. Volunteers are a huge part of our program. We couldn't do what we did without them. We have usually 150 to 200 volunteer positions each year, and they're filled by, believe it or not, volunteers that come from all over the United States. These can include companions, team leaders, assistant team leaders, and our group of moms that we have that cook those cherished home-cooked meals at the ranch and help in any way possible. It's a great experience for all of them, and you can apply to be a volunteer on our webpage as well.
Again, the website is warriorsinquietwaters.org. If you're a combat veteran, you can sign up to participate in 2025 starting in January, but you'll want to be quick on that because they only serve 300 veterans a year, and there's going to be a lot they're going to want to sign up. But you can sign up anytime to donate or to volunteer. The website, again, warriorsinquietwaters.org. Mike, thanks so much for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Before we wrap things up, I would like to tip my cap and salute all of you who have served. About 6% of our population in America has served in the military, and Veterans Day is all about honoring not only those who served, but the families that supported them while they served. So if you get a chance, thank a veteran. If there's a Veterans Day activity taking place in your town or county, consider attending it. You'll be glad you did. On that note, it's time to go. If you didn't catch the whole show, we will be uploading it as a podcast. Just look for America Outdoors Radio. And if you want to hear the Pacific Northwest edition of this show, just go to YouTube and check out the Cove Sportsman's Network for the Pacific Northwest edition of America Outdoors Radio, heard exclusively on Seattle Sports Radio. KJR 93.3 Saturdays from 7 to 8 a.m. It carries 13 extra minutes of regional content that covers the Pacific Northwest. And with that, it's time to go. So enjoy your Veterans Day weekend. And with any luck, you might be able to get out for some bird hunting, big game hunting, wildlife watching, or fishing too. Whatever you do, be blessed, be healthy, and remember this. It is your country and your outdoors, so get out there and enjoy it.
A seafood bounty is waiting for you on Northwest Oregon's Tillamook Coast. Catch a limit of big salmon, haul up a pot of delicious crab. Plan your visit today at tillamookcoast.com.